kings and queens, your majesties, welcome back to the channel. Thank you so much for returning. Trust you and yours are well and you're loving yourself and others like always. Many thanks to all of you for the support you give to the channel. Thank you so much to our channel members, to our anonymous supporters, to all of you my esteemed subscribers. You're loved, celebrated, and of course appreciated. I want us to have some discussion today. It's about Islam. Yes, the first point of Islam in Africa is North Africa. I want us to listen to Ebenezer Heru. He is an author of a book. I think I introduced you to that book here. I don't know if most of you tried to get that book, but if you do not, I will still try to see if I can leave a link to the book so that you can get to it. He made mention about something important about the spread of Islam. And you know, when we talk about, I keep telling you here, I won't have a discussion on things that I do not really know about. I was never a Muslim, so there are parts of Islam that I do not know. But the little knowledge that we see is what we share so that we deliberate upon. We are all aware that prior to Islamization of the continent had a life. Prior to Christianity, the continent has a life. Okay, we had a religious system, a spiritual system rather, which we adhere to. We know who the creator is. We had a worship system because Dr. Ben would tell you that the first worship that ever existed in the life of humanity or woman is the worship of the goddess Hathor. So this notion, this understanding have always been there in our heads, and that is why it is so easy for all this religion to have a successful hold on us as Africans, because already we know what it is to commune with the divine, to have interaction with the spirit, and to converse with the creator. So when we talk about Islam and North Africa, it's a very emotional one. I'm saying a very emotional one because, well, and I think these are topics that do not really, I don't know whether maybe people do not really have an interest to this very topic, or maybe it's because it's not as popular as it should be. Okay, or maybe it's like maybe a taboo to talk about things like, I don't know, but it's not getting the attention it should get. Are we aware that, or maybe because the European colonization and involvement in the continent is a more recent one, that is why it is what is very, very rampant? Because when we talk about Islamization of the continent, the Arab involvement, the destruction of the northern part of the continent, we talk about the earliest involvement of the Arabs. Okay, prior to the Arab involving, there were other sovereign powers who had involved in Egypt and North Africa, but they didn't destroy their heritage. They didn't destroy they did anyway, they did, but not to the level of which the Arab did. The Arab came with their own religion and imposed it on these people. And if you do not practice this religion, you are unalived. They tried their best to ethnically cleansed North Africa, and that is why we have the situation we have today in North Africa. Like someone will say, I've forgotten his name, that it is because the Arab met first North Africa and other parts of the continent that we have Islam, and then the region where Europe came to first, we have Christianity. So these are all foreign bodies meddling with our way of life and interrupting our civilization. I'm talking about interrupting because we already had a civilization. They interrupted that which we had. So let's listen to this and we'll take it up from there.
It was the Arabs who used the Islamic religion to totally destroy Africa after the Romans had ruled for 600 years. The Arab Muslims were very brutal and ruthless in the spread of Islam, especially around North Africa. They enslaved and massacred over 10 million innocent African women and children during the Arab slave trade. The first point of Islam in Africa was in North Africa, where the Arab Muslims invaded Egypt and conquered it in 640 AD. The innocent Africans around North Africa were later colonized and Islamized. They were forced to receive Islam. This marked the beginning of the Arab slave trade, which lasted for over 700 years. The Arabs believed that Islam should be the official religion for Africans in North Africa. In Egypt, Africans who decided to follow Amen-Ra, that is the sun god and the central deity of Egypt. Anyone who decided to follow this god was butchered by the Arab Muslims, while those who decided to follow Islam were made to speak Arabic as their official tongue. In Egypt alone, over 1 million African Egyptians were massacred. The African Egyptian women were forced to marry Arab men, and this was how Egypt was taken from the Africans till today. They destroyed the African Egyptian method of writing, which is the hieroglyphs, and introduced Arabic. Hundreds and thousands of Africans in North Africa were massacred each month just because they refused to follow Prophet Muhammad. The traditional African worship was declared blasphemy in Islam. In the case of Nigeria, the Islamic religion penetrated around the 11th century, starting from Brunu. It was brought and spread by converted Africans and Arabic traders from North Africa. And in the year 1804, the Fulani Islamic leader and preacher, in the person of Usman Dan Fodio, felt that the Hausas were not practicing true Islam. It was at this moment Usman Dan Fodio organized a bloody jihad, which led to the establishment of the Sokoto Caliphate in Nigeria. This jihad led to the death of hundreds of innocent Hausa people in Nigeria. The Fulanis are not Nigerians. I repeat, the Fulanis you see today in Nigeria are not Nigerians. They are invaders who invaded the northern region of Nigeria through the leadership of Usman Dan Fodio. Today, the Hausa people who are the original Nigerians are still colonized by these Fulanis, all in the name of Islam.
The Arabs conquered North Africa in a jihad between 639 and 708 AD. And this is why North Africa today is Arab. Because if we go back in the day, North Africans used to be black, just like the rest of Africa. But let's read what happened. A scholar called Ibn Khaldun explained what happened. At the time of the conquest of northern Africa, and I've put in brackets by the Arabs, some merchants penetrated into the western part of the land of the blacks and found no king more powerful than the king of Ghana. His states extended westwards to the shores of the Atlantic Ocean. Kumbisale, the capital of this strong, populous nation, was made up of 2 towns and formed one of the greatest and best populated cities in the world. The author of the Book of Roger makes special mention of it, as does the author of Roads and Kingdoms. So what have we just been told? When the Arabs conquered North Africa, they tried something in West Africa. But whatever they tried, they were stopped by this most powerful West African king, who presumably handed out a smackdown. That king was the ruler of Ghana, and his territories were all the way from the Atlantic Ocean inland. And his capital city was one of the greatest and best populated cities in the world. And if we want to know more about ancient Ghana, we should read this book, the Book of Roger, and we should read another book, The Roads and Kingdoms. We're going to follow up on both of those books. Now, the Arabs in Africa brought in Islam, and Islam became a rival for traditional African religions. And it divided Africans then, and it divides Africans today. Should we stick with tradition, or should we jump on Islam? You also had Africa's first major refugee problems, because the early North Africans that used to live in Egypt don't. The ones that used to live in Libya don't. The ones that used to live in what is today Algeria, Morocco, Tunisia, they don't. They moved south. And this is why black people in Africa live south of the Sahara. An African queen from Mauritania called Dahia El Kahina tried to stop the Arab invasions, and she was brave and she fought back, but ultimately she was killed in battle, and the Arabs conquered North Africa. And African and Arab conflict would escalate, and even blowing up into civil war. So they had to find a ruler who could unite both. And this ruler was Abd al-Rahman I. He's said to have been part Arab, i.e. Yemeni, and part African. So he would have been fully black, in other words. Right? In May 756, he became the ruler of Islamic Spain and the first of the Umayyads. Okay, the early years. The early years of Islamic rule in Spain were unstable. There were 19 governors over Cordoba between 716 and 747. When you have a large number of rulers in a short period of time, that's political instability. Right? Actually, I did not want to mention Kwesi, but yeah, there it is. All right, so what happened next? Well, the Muslims took control of land vacated by the Spaniards, who fled north. Arabs settled the most fertile part of the south and left Africans poorer land in central Spain and areas closer to the north. And this led to conflict between Musa, the Arab overlord, but let's be quite clear, Yemeni overlord, and Tariq, the African subordinate. An African and Arab conflict would escalate and even blowing up into civil war. So they had to find a ruler who could unite both. And this ruler was Abd al-Rahman I. He is said to have been part Arab, i.e. Yemeni, and part African. So he would have been fully black, in other words. Right? In May 756, he became the ruler of Islamic Spain and the first of the Umayyads. He divided the country into military districts and administered it on that basis, and he created a standing army of 40,000 men who were mostly Africans. In agriculture, he made developments that led to the growth of the farming industry. He introduced accurate land surveying, built granaries to combat food shortages, and established effective irrigation canals. From the Middle East, he imported cotton, fruits, rice, spices, sugarcane, and vegetables. And so the industries that developed from Abd al-Rahman's policies were sugarcane and cotton were planted near the Mediterranean coastal regions. Figs and olives were farmed in the south. Oranges and wine were cultivated in Granada and Malaga provinces. Oranges, rice, and palm trees sprouted in Valencia. A silk industry grew up in Murcia. Leatherworking and dyeing flourished in Cordoba. Ordnance developed in Toledo, and ceramics industry prospered in Almeria. Now, this is what the Science Museum in Granada has to say. We've got here hydraulic technology. Great advances were made in hydraulic technology in El Andalus, Andalusia, Spain. The traditions of classical engineering were combined with new ideas emanating from the Islamic world from two principal sources, Syria and North Africa. The Eastern writer, El Yaziri, was a leading proponent of these ideas. So, new ideas, what dates please? What dates? 12th and 13th centuries. Does that make sense? And when this happened, this was new. We getting this? And then they have an example of a water wheel, and then they have the animal-powered water lifting device. Can you see that? Yeah? Now, medieval Nubia had sakias. Can you see that that sakia is the same as that? Does that make sense? All they did was they changed the four-legged beastie in the picture.
Now when we talk about the Fulani's involvement in the continent, now you can see that it's not today that we have Fulani being against the continent. It's been for a while now. And they're always involved in unaliving, destroying, pillaging. Little wonder we have the young Fulani man who was accusing Ibrahim Traore. The question I asked and others asked were, why is it that it's just your people who have been unaliving, destroying, pillaging the continent for a long time? You didn't call out your people, but you are calling out the man who is trying to cleanse the destruction, the dirt that your people had piled up in his nation. So this issue of Fulani is not today. It has been a long time, and they will keep still being used if nothing is done about this situation. When we talk about the Jewish Holocaust, I hear that is so rampant, so popular, the Jewish Holocaust, but no one wants to remember the African Holocaust. The number of people that have died in the name of Christianity, European invasion, Islam, Arab invasion, is so much that you cannot count them. It's uncountable. A lot of Africans have been destroyed, but nobody's talking about it. And then when you say 1, 2, you hear of Jewish Holocaust. What about the African Holocaust? Listen to these informations and you leave your thoughts and opinion there at the section, Your Majesties.
In the Congo Free State, owned by the most Christian king of Belgium, Leopold II, the king's policy reduced the population within 20 years from over 20 million to under 10 million. In the process, slavery and disorder were visited upon the African inhabitants of the Free State. Leopold simply declared the land and the people his own. He made the produce of the land his own, wrecked the trade of the land, and made slaves of those natives he did not kill. And of them he demanded rubber, more and ever more rubber. One of his agents, a certain Lieutenant Tilkins, tells in a letter how this rubber was obtained. Commandant Verstraeten visited my station and congratulated me warmly. He said his report would depend upon the quantity of rubber which I was able to provide. The quantity increased from 360 kilograms in September to 1,500 in October, and from January onwards it will amount to 4,000 per month, which will bring me in a monthly premium of 500 francs. Am I not a lucky fellow? If I go on like this, within 2 years I shall have earned premiums of 12,000 feces. SS Van Kerkhoven is coming down the Nile and will demand 1,500 porters. Unlucky niggers, I can hardly bear to think of them. I am asking myself how on earth I shall be able to hunt up so large a number. Marshes, hunger, exhaustion. How much blood will be shed because of this transport? 3 times already, I have had to make war upon the chiefs who would not help me to get the men I needed. The fellows would rather die in their own forests than as members of a transport train. If a chief refuses, that means war, with modern firearms on one side against spears and javelins on the other. A chief has just been to see me, complaining, "My village has been destroyed and my wives have been killed." But what on earth can I do? I have often been compelled to keep these unhappy chiefs in chains until they get for me 100 or 200 porters. Very often my soldiers find the villages empty of men, and then they seize the women and the children. I see the likelihood of a general uprising. The natives are sick of the regime, of having to work as porters, of gathering rubber, of being forced to provide foodstuffs. Once more, I have been fighting for 3 months, with only 10 days interval. I have 152 prisoners. For 2 years I have been making war in this district, but have not been able to force the natives to submit. They would rather die. What am I to do? I am paid for my work. I am merely a tool in the hands of my superiors and carry out their orders as discipline demands. And the result? Edmond Picard, distinguished Belgian jurist and senator on traveling in the Congo Free State, recorded what he saw. The inhabitants have disappeared. Their homes have been burned. Huge heaps of ashes amid neglected palm hedges and devastated abandoned fields. Inhuman floggings, murders, plundering, and carrying offs. The people flee. A continual succession of blacks, carrying loads upon their heads, worn-out beasts of burden with projecting joints, wasted features, and staring eyes, perpetually trying to keep afoot despite their exhaustion. By thousands they pass, in the service of the state, handed over by the chiefs, whose slaves they are and who rob them of their wages. They totter along the road with bent knees and protruding bellies, crawling with vermin, a dreadful procession across hill and dale, dying from exhaustion by the wayside, or often succumbing even should they reach home after their wanderings. An American missionary reported, "It is blood-curdling to see them, the soldiers, returning with hands of the slain, and to find the hands of young children amongst the bigger ones evidencing their bravery." The rubber from this district has cost hundreds of lives, and the scenes I have witnessed, while unable to help the oppressed, have been almost enough to make me wish I were dead. This rubber traffic is steeped in blood, and if the natives were to rise and sweep every white person on the Upper Congo into eternity, there would still be left a fearful balance to their credit. An agent of a concessionaire company wrote home boasting that he had killed 150 men, cut off 60 hands, crucified women and children, and hung the remains of mutilated men on the village fence. After years of such man-made devastation, in justification of their conduct, Belgian ministers of state presented the Congo Africans to the world as little better than animals, with no conception of land tenure or government, no instinct for commerce or industrial pursuits, a people entitled to nothing. But a few years before, it had not been so.